I'll start with the dial calipers. So reading them is a little bit more difficult than the digital calipers because you have to do some math here. It's pretty simple, but there's a scale on the bottom that's measured. These small numbers here are 100. Every line is 100 thousandths, and the big lines are inches, so 1,000 thousandths. So if we bring it out here, that's about 4 inches because we're at the 4-inch line. Now the dial here is every line accounts for 1,000th of an inch. So if we hold it all the way closed, it's setting on 0. Actually, we can lock it right there. If you unlock it, you can move this back and forth, and that would be to adjust it. But if we set that at 0 and open this up, actually if we just open up one line, and the distance between these two jaws is 1,000th of an inch. Can't see it. But if you open it up all the way to 100, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then back to 0 would be 100, and we're actually from 0 to the 100, or the 1 mark down here. And if we go another 100 one time around, then it takes us to the 200 mark down here. So this counts how many hundreds of thousands we have, and this counts down to the thousandth. So we have a reading like right here. We would start counting. We would see that we are all the way to the 1. So it'll be 1 inch plus 100 thousandths is the next mark we can see. And then there are 34 thousandths on our dial. So this would end up being 1.134. Anyway, once you get to know how to read them, they're pretty easy. Now there's a couple different ways that you can measure with a caliper. You can measure things on the outside, like a distance, clamping like that. You could also do an inside, like an inside diameter, and a depth. So if you're on a surface plate, you could actually extend this out. This surface, when it's closed, will be in line with that surface. So you could set it down and pick up a depth like that. That'd be more useful for a pocket. And then lastly, actually, when you close these at 0, these two faces are flush. So you could take a depth also this way. So those are the 4 major ways that you can actually use the calipers for outside, inside, depth, and depth. A lot of people think that a digital caliper, because it's easy to read, it'd be easier to take measurements, but actually I think sometimes it's easier to do it on a dial one like this. The reason is because instead of numbers, you can actually see distances. So say your part is supposed to be 490 thousandths, and this shows that it's 500 thousandths. It's really easy to do the subtraction. You can see that there's 10 lines difference between what it is and what it's supposed to be. On a simple calculation like that, you could do minus 10 thousandths in your head, but sometimes it's easy to look on the dial and count the number of lines rather than having to subtract the numbers in your head. So you can sort of use this dial as a calculator on the spot. Anyway, I think that is a useful tool. Now the digital, since it's a digital readout, you'll probably have to, you might have to use a calculator for the numbers. But these can be just as accurate as the dial calipers. It all depends on what kind you get. The pair that we have here, I've noticed that there is a little bit of compression that can happen in the calipers. So if I 0 the calipers, actually that's something you have to do that you don't normally do on dial. You have to close them, make sure they close to 0. Actually these aren't. So if I close the calipers, make sure they're zeroed, then I can start using them, because actually you could bring them out here, 0 them there, and start measuring something, and you would get pretty strange values. So you have to make sure you close them and then 0 them. But you can see here, I just zeroed them and they're still closed, but we're reading 2 thousandths right now. And if I press it, now we're at negative 7.5 thousandths. If I release it, we're up to 3 thousandths. So there's a pretty big range there. So something to get used to. Not all digital calipers are like this. It all depends on what you get. But you can still take accurate measurements. If you press while you zero it, and you press while you're taking your measurement, then it should be pretty accurate. If you don't press while you are measuring, then you have to make sure that you don't press when you zero. Whatever condition the calipers are in whenever you zero it, you have to make sure you put that same amount of pressure on when you're taking the measurement. And that is true also of dial calipers. The needle might flop back and forth a little bit depending on how much pressure you're putting on it. So something you have to take into account. Again, that's all dependent on what calipers you have. You need to know your calipers and how they react to different amounts of pressure. You could easily go out and spend over $100 or even $200 on a set of calipers, but these were about 30 and these may have been 15 or 20. They may not be accurate down to the 10th of a thousandth, but they'll work for almost anything. Unless you're doing precision machining, they'll work. So even with these Harbor Freight calipers, they have lifetime warranty, most of them. So if there's anything that breaks or goes wrong, you can just take them in and a couple minutes they'll give you a new one. From our experience, they don't give a hard time about that. So I think for the price, these are a really good set of calipers. Regardless if they're dial or digital, depends on preference, what you're doing, and what you're used to. Anyway, I think calipers are really great tools for measuring. They can get accurate and measure a lot of different ways, outside, inside, and depth. They can do a lot more than a ruler can, and I think they're overall just a really great tool.